I'm supporting Jeremy Corbyn for leader because I think he's the saviour of the Labour Party, to be honest. The Labour Party needs to go back to the voice of the people, and it hasn't been that for, I can't remember when, probably slightly before I was able to vote. And for me, if I'm honest, I've never been a member of the Labour Party. If Jeremy Corbyn, I've become a supporter so I can vote for him. If Jeremy Corbyn becomes the leader of the Labour Party, they will get my support wholeheartedly. But I think he is the voice of the people, is the voice for justice, for reason, for fairness, and you can't ask more than that.
He's the best candidate for the North because he set out a bold and radical economic and industrial strategy. Where I grew up in the 1980s, industry was taken away from us in the North, and we've had decades since where people have been locked in a cycle of poverty and debt. And we need to offer the children and their children's children that we're going to offer them a future. And the only way we can do that is by offering a bold economic and industrial strategy based on manufacturing and other green industries.
Taking it over the past 3 or 4 decades, Britain had a huge manufacturing base until the decline of the 1970s. The Labour government in the 1970s actually tried very hard to invest in manufacturing, to invest in developing high-tech industry, National Economic Development Council and all that. There were some very interesting things going on where the government was trying to encourage high-tech industry, where so we don't just invent things, we also make things. Thatcher came along in 1980, obsessed with a free market economy, obsessed with the destruction of big industries, hence we saw systemically the destruction of the shipbuilding industry straight away, the steel industry, and then of course historically the mining industry, and the promotion of financial services at the expense of everything else. So we now end up with one of the weaker and more unbalanced economies across Europe. Germany and France and Italy have a much better manufacturing base than we do because their governments are interested in manufacturing industry. Successive British governments have not been, and we're more interested in importing cheap goods from China rather than promoting economic development here.
He's the best candidate for the North because for so long we've basically been shafted up here. And not just by the Tory party have completely shafted us. George Osborne and his Northern Powerhouse, which I was always slightly dubious. Anything that the Tories give us, there's some ulterior motive for that.
What we want is surely regional authorities, call it Greater Manchester, call it Met Counties, whatever, that have a clear planning responsibility on transport, all aspects of transport, buses as well as network rail, as well as trams. We also need an industrial development strategy that is locally based, working with the universities particularly, so you build up a research basis and a development basis from it. And that if they're running services, they've got to be properly funded. What the government seems to be doing is actually transferring the responsibility for cuts in a lot of local services from themselves to local government by underfunding them.
We should all aspire to have a decent quality of living for everybody who lives in this country. And that's what Jeremy stands for. And I think people can relate to him. He's a human being first and foremost, and he cares about the people that he represents.
He's a thoroughly decent man. I think Tony Benn once said that there are some politicians who are weather vanes and they blow in the wind and they'll tell people what they think people want to hear. There are other politicians who are signposts, who convince us what we need to believe and what we need to do to secure a better future. And Jeremy is that signpost. He's a thoroughly honest and decent man, and it's that kind of honesty that I want to see brought back into politics once again.
He's what the North needs. We're looking at basic things like, the NHS, cuts to the NHS, cuts to the arts, cuts, our homeless problem, and he speaks to that. He speaks to the grassroots.
I'm supporting Jeremy because for me he offers us real hope, not just in the Labour Party but in Britain generally. In 1945 people came back from war to vote for a party that offered real hope, and I think that's what Labour needs to do going forward. The Tories have sold fear for decades and they've done it very, very well. The only chance that we have in winning a general election and changing this country is by selling hope again.